lot of productive conversations.
Well, yeah,
Somebody did pray to rededicate their life to Christ tonight, so
that's cool.
that was productive. But yeah, we
So,
gotta
welcome to Reasonable Faith.
grab a
Glad to
seat
see you all
here.
here. In the way of announcements, this weekend we are having Pancakes Pontification because it's the beginning of a new month. I think we'll probably just do it at the IHOP again. So it'll be the IHOP on 75 near Planet Parkway. The address will be sent out in the Discord. So yeah, we have that. I believe that is the main thing coming up. As for, and of course we just had our evangelism thing, so thank you all to everyone who came out for that. So tonight we are going to be having Dr. Raj Sebastian talk about Hinduism, so I'll go ahead and leave it over to him.
Let me just mention while he's coming up, I wanted to introduce Garrett Sanders here. He came to the group when we first formed it over a dozen years ago. Sure, yeah. So he was a skeptic at the time. He was always the one that was just bombarding. It was good questions, and he was a good interlocutor. But he's come back to faith in Christ, and he's now a student here in grad school. So we're so glad to have Garrett back, and also that you now believe in Christianity. So.
Yeah, I once did, and if Garrett if Garrett Ingalls ever watches this, I'm sure he's gonna laugh his butt off. So
the leader at the time, the president of the club originally was.
We got into it once, and man, it was it was intense, but we need to apologize to him for that. But I'm sure he knows. I actually spoke to him a couple years ago and told him, hey, dude, I actually have started to believe or consider myself a believer again. I would actually say that I really never stopped believing, really, in my heart.
Okay.
Is how I would describe it. But I would say that I didn't believe intellectually.
That's a pretty big issue, though, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
it's how you identify yourself, right? Inside your mind, how you think about the world and how you see yourself in it is your identity. And I just didn't intellectually believe that Christianity could be true or reasonable, and so I stopped identifying as a Christian. And a big part of it was also just being open to new philosophies and new people. So that was another big part of my motive. I think it was just trying, because I grew up in a pretty I don't want to say closed off environment, but a pretty just my mom was pretty opinionated. There just wasn't much discussion or debate, and it was generally pretty brushed off. Like, the people that don't believe this are crazy, So for me, it was very, when I finally started meeting other people with other beliefs, it was very like, oh my gosh, like it was very shocking. So I got into it, but yeah, no, it was it was actually like I came to the group in around the 2012 era, but I actually started considering myself a Christian again probably sometime around 2017 to 19. So really like 3 or 4 years after I ever attended any of these groups. So it's a process that works in people, and it doesn't happen all at once. So yeah. But it's good to be here, and thanks for introducing
so y'all should
me.
get to know Garrett, and he's a student here now,
What do you study?
I'm doing a master's in information technology management. Yeah. So, and really, when I first got into the apologetic stuff, I was really more interested in like the historicity of Jesus stuff. I thought that'd be the easiest to disprove.
You were a big Bart Ehrman fan, I remember.
I still am. I love the guy. But yeah, I got interested in that because I thought it'd be the easiest to disprove. But that is very compelling. That stuff's very compelling, and it's all just very. I like Blake Gunta. I don't know if you guys have met him or if he's spoken, but he used to be a big speaker. He used to say it's a cumulative case, and that's certainly how I felt about it in my own life. And ultimately, it was really, I would say the kind of breaking point was consciousness. I kind of started meditating and thinking about the nature of kind of gravitating back to, it's like, okay, well, I don't believe in materialism anymore. So then once that kind of started shifting, I started going more, okay, started reconsidering everything, and really, actually, honestly, it was really more of just a thing of the heart, honestly. It was really more just kind of like, I just didn't feel okay if I wasn't a Christian, if I didn't, it was Jesus that made me feel okay, and praying and talking to Jesus. If that makes me crazy, then it's what I am, so, and that's what I tell everybody,
All
just
right.
try to be humble and,
Anyway, yeah, so it's an encouraging story and shows us some of the importance of apologetics. But yeah, we don't want to take Raj's
Oh,
time.
that's
But
fine.
Thank you for coming here, Raj.
Thank you,
It's great
thank you.
to have here.
Thanks. And thanks for sharing your story. What an inspiration. We all have that, we are not really coming with a total blankness in our mind. That's where we call it. Some people have some faith, and then you have that faith seeking understanding. That's a statement from Augustine.
Yeah.
So, sounds like your case. You had a little bit faith, you want to understand if that was, right or not. So, talking about Hinduism, now you see a couple of pictures there, one is of course a Christian one, but next to that there is a God. So, when we talk about Hinduism, one thing we have to keep in mind is that, there's a difference between popular Hinduism and philosophical Hinduism. This is huge because anytime you see Hinduism, what you are seeing is popular Hinduism. But anytime you talk to a Hindu, you are not going to talk about popular Hinduism, or he is not, or she is not going to talk to you about popular Hinduism. I'll explain to you why that is. So, then there is another side of Hinduism called philosophical Hinduism. That's the only area they are going to engage with you, because nobody is going to come and talk to you that this God is real, with an elephant head and a human body, right? Why is that? Because logically speaking, you cannot defend that for a long time. If you read famous Norman Geisler's book on apologetics, he says it takes only 3 or 4 questions to take a polytheist believer to become a monotheist believer. Just ask, who made this God? Okay, of course there are story, like in the story there is a father. Who made that God? Right? You ask that 2-3 times, you are into one God. So, which is true of this God too. According to the Hindu story, this God, which is called Ganpati with an elephant head and a human body, was created by a couple known as Shiva and Parvati. So, Shiva is the God, Parvati is the wife, and Shiva, according to Hindu belief, is they have a belief in tritheism. There are 3 main gods. So, it's not Trinitarianism, it's called tritheism, 3 main gods. So, one God creating everything, another God sustaining everything, another God maintaining the balance with the death and things like that. Okay, so that God, the third God, Shiva, he married a lady and had this child. Of course, there's more story. He was not born like that, but the story. So, quick question: who created that God? Okay, his father Shiva. Who created Shiva? Okay, again, according to Hinduism, all those 3 gods came out of one God. Done, right? And there's a word in Hinduism called Parama Ishwar. Param Ishwar means the God above all gods. You actually see that term in the Bible, right? God of gods, Lord of lords, right? Parameshwar, that's what it exactly means in Hinduism. So, they are not going to dialogue with you there either. Okay? So, whenever you talk to a Hindu, they are going to always jump, they are going to actually make a leap from that popular Hinduism that you see in the temples where they have idols and they fall before that, and all those pujas and offerings and all they do, they are going to disregard all that and talk to you at a different level, which they don't really practice, but they dialogue on that level. Okay, so there is this problem of a leap. Okay, now if you don't understand, you will not be able to dialogue with a Hindu, if you don't understand that part. So, we talk about philosophical Hinduism. Am I supposed to use this? Where is the, what do I click? Okay, the keyboard. Okay, I got it. All right. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, now it's easier. Okay, so There are three branches of philosophical Hinduism. Again, to make it easier, if you think of Christianity in comparison, it will be easy for you to understand this difference. Just for an example, okay, not a perfect example. Think of Roman Catholicism, not necessarily in this country, but if you actually go to like India or Africa or even some southern part of America and watch Roman Catholicism in practice, you will see a lot of things that are similar to Hinduism. Like they have so many idols, they have so many, they may not call it idol, but saints to whom they pray or adore, and then festivals for them, a lot of things like that, and then some practices, even like some special days, things like that. So when you come to Protestant side, we can consider it to be a little more philosophical, right? We are more actually skeptical. Skepticism has a value, right? If you are not skeptic, you end up in dogmatism, right? You start believing in anything. That's where actually religious extremism come, right? So some skepticism is good, okay? It's not totally bad. So when you come to Protestant side, you start questioning, you start protesting, right? You start philosophizing, and you avoid all those kind of things. So think of that kind of a difference between popular Hinduism and philosophical Hinduism. So when you come to philosophical Hinduism, there is only one God, okay? Surprising, right? In Hinduism, there is only one God, okay? There is only one God. No idol worship, okay? Again, the same person who's talked to you on philosophical Hinduism, he goes next day morning to a temple and he might worship at the temple in front of the idol. That's reality, okay? That's practical life, but when they are dialoguing, they will not dialogue there, okay? So there are main three branches called philosophical schools of Hinduism, and we'll talk about that. Now I want you to just understand, I want to tell you about something. When you talk about philosophical Hinduism, though like I said, the next day they might be going back to the temple, don't write off them as merely foolish ideas, okay? It is not. They have actually spent time on thoughts and bringing up some great ideas. In fact, I want to tell the story of one great missionary. You all know probably William Carey. How many of you have heard about William Carey, right? If you are in missions, you know. He is known as the father of modern missions, okay? He went from England to India, landed in Calcutta. He was a self-taught man. He was actually a shoemaker before he went, not really well educated. He learned the basic language like Greek and all, translated Bible into almost 36 languages by himself, printed it in many languages, and started colleges in India, okay? He was not well educated, self-taught, became very influential. That's why he is known as father of modern missions. Now what people don't hear, people hear about William Carey if you are in missions, okay? What you don't hear is about one of his companions who went with him. There were actually three of them. They were called the trio, okay? The Serampore trio. William Carey started a university called Serampore University in India. So they were called the Serampore trio, three of them. So one of them started going and having dialogue with the Hindu gurus there in Calcutta, and eventually became a convert to Hinduism. Okay, and William Carey writes about it. He says, this the worst thing, worst day of his life. My heart is bleeding. Someone goes and falls into this pagan belief system. But that's why I said, don't think that they are just foolishness. This stuff here, an elephant head, a human body is foolishness. Okay, so when we talk about philosophical Hinduism, I told you there are three branches. The first one. Okay, before we get there, we'll just talk about some other details. So the beginning of Hinduism, nobody really knows when it began, so there is no date or historical reference. So if you talk to a Hindu, again, like a really devout Hindu, they would argue that this is the original religion. Like they would say this is the oldest religion. That's what they mean. Okay.
I have a friend in India who I talk to a lot.
Yeah.
And we talk occasionally about how their old cultures that had amazing technology and all kinds of things in India.
Yeah. So that's their claim. Okay, claim to the oldest religion. which is not necessarily true. If you actually read Cordovan's book on neighboring faiths, some of you are probably familiar with, he speaks about actually monotheism being the original religion. Because if you take, just like Hinduism, we talked about who created that God, who created that God, few ask that few questions, you see that underneath every religion, even the most primitive religions that you might see on the planet, they have a belief about this one supreme God. They may not call it by the same name, but they have an idea like one supreme God or the creator of all, or the absolute spirit, things like that. Okay, so Cordovan argues that the original religion was monotheism, and then as sin took over humanity, we started coming out with these weird ideas. So, so again, no date, that's one thing. Second thing, there's no founder, there's no idea who began this. That's again another Hindu argument. This is not like somebody started this religion, it's not from a human being, this is the original religion of humanity. Okay, that would be their argument. But interestingly, there are some similarities you can find between now Iran or Iran, however you say that. Okay, it's Iran or Iran or somehow somebody ran. Okay, so it's Iran. There are some literatures and religions that came out from there. One religion is called Zoroastrianism. Now, Zoroastrians were persecuted later on. When they were persecuted, they actually ran away to India and it survived there. Okay, so you actually you have that religion surviving in India. Now, you see that some of their literature that came from there and the literature that are in India, in called Vedas, they are very similar, especially when it comes to the names of some god. Now, how would you explain that the names of some god in Iran and India are same? Like exactly same names, right? And then some of the sacrificial systems, like you have to do this, you have to do that, they are same. So when it comes to philosophical Hinduism, now I told you there are two branches of Hinduism, popular and philosophical. In philosophical Hinduism, they have their own literature, right? In popular Hinduism, you have your own literature. So just like I said about Catholicism, in Catholicism you have your tradition, right? The church has its traditions, and in in Protestantism we say we have our New Testament Bible as the supreme authority, but then we have other things like the solas and the 5-point Calvinism and all that, right? How many points you take, if you don't know about that, just forget. Don't even Google it. Okay, don't even Google it. Okay, so so anyway, so this connection, because of this connection, historians say probably some of the people migrated, the Aryans migrated from this Iran area, the Middle East area, to India and then took over the land. So this is called the theory of Aryan migration in India. Okay, and according to that theory, the people who are ruling India now are the Aryans, and they want to actually in India you have basically three types of people. You have Aryans, you have Dravidians, and you have Mongolians. Because northeast part of India was on the border of China. They are actually Mongolians. You can actually look at them and say they are not Indians. So I mean, it became part of India only because the Britishers left it with Indians. Okay, right. So and those people, when they come to like the Indians at the mainland India for education, the way they say in their like local area, we are going to India for studies. Okay, so you can understand the difference, right? So because of that, they believe that this is what happened, but again, the ruling Aryans will not accept that. They would say they are part of the original people of the land. Again, another important thing about Hinduism is, if you ask a Hindu, what do I have to believe to become a Hindu, he will have a tough time answering that question. Okay. Now, it's easy for a Muslim or for a Christian to tell what you have to believe, right? But that's not the case with the Hindu, because there is no creed, because nobody really started it. It's more like a natural religion, of course. Because of that, they have of course writings, but even the writings you will actually see contradictory statements. Like in Vedas, it will clearly say there's only one God, and the next chapter will say about, oh, you praise this god and that god and you will get benefits.
Oh, just
Right.
the next chapter.
Next chapter, okay, you don't have to go far away, okay, which means those chapters are probably written by different people, somebody, put it together. So because of that, there is no creed. The famous, one of the famous modern Hindus, Gandhiji, most people have heard about. In his book, actually, he wrote like this: you can be a Hindu and be a Muslim, an atheist, a Muslim, a Jain, whatever you want, you can still be a Hindu, because there is no creed, right? You can believe whatever you want. So,
We talked to a Hindu that didn't believe in God tonight, actually.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So as long as you believe that, the only problem they will have is if you believe that Jesus is the only way, then you have a problem. So they have a problem with exclusivism, okay? Anything that is inclusive, they are okay with it. Now, some important characteristics of popular Hinduism, I don't want to spend too much time here because, like I said, that's not where they're going to talk to you about. So they believe in many gods, goddesses, incarnations. They actually believe in 10 incarnations of one god. So it's not different gods, that one god taking 10 incarnations, and there could be other incarnations of other gods. There is idol worship, nature worship, temples and festivals, spirit worship, sacrifices, offerings, festivals, all those things. Even sacrifices is not very common, but is still practiced in Hindu religions, in some temples even. So the literature of popular Hinduism, there are two epics, great epics called Ramayana and Mahabharata, and they both are war epics. They are actually war epics, they are literal war, okay. So that's popular Hinduism. So all those gods, many of those gods and incarnation stories and all, they come from these two books. So when it comes to philosophical Hinduism, they have different literature. Their literatures are Vedas and Bhagavad Gita. Now Bhagavad Gita, remember I told about two epics earlier. The second epic called Mahabharata, in that war epic, there is a story where one of the gods, who is an incarnation, tells a great warrior some principles of war and ethics and karma and things like that. What is your duty and things like that, okay. So that's more like a god. So for them, that God speaking to a human being, so for them that is God's speech. So they consider that as philosophical because it is about ethics and all. So for philosophical Hinduism, they take that chapter from that epic, and then they have Vedas. So Vedas and Bhagavad Gita are the source for philosophical Hinduism, not the epics. Now the main characteristics of philosophical Hinduism, they believe that absolute reality is one and it is impersonal. Now if you have taken any class on philosophy, you know that there is a Greek philosophical idea called monism, right. In monism, you discuss this idea, are we really one or we are many, right. So there was a the Greek philosopher, was it Pergamenus? Parmenides and Sene, okay, his follower, right? Okay, they both argued that reality is one. The argument was, we are all beings, right? So who is a non-being? Is anyone who is a non-being? Can you say any non-being? There is nothing called non-being. So he said reality is one, because all what we have are beings, okay. So this is how philosophy goes, right. You come up with some weird arguments and you make something out of it, get some disciples, right. So that's called monism. So everything that you see is actually one, reality is one. So in Hinduism, they have an idea like this called absolute reality is one. In Hinduism, the religious statement you will hear is like this: God is all and all is God. Which means you are part of God, God is part of you, God is in you, you are in God, it's all one. Okay, so basically that Greek philosophy of monism can be found in Hinduism. Okay, and Hindus will say we had this idea even before the Greeks had it. Okay, so
Which in this case is probably true. But
yeah, well, okay, I want to focus one thing, this is very important, I didn't want to miss that point. And that one, the absolute reality is impersonal, okay. I will be happy explaining that one point here today, even if we don't talk about anything else, okay. Now, hear me this one point, this absolute God we are talking about, we talk about who created this God, who created that God, and finally talk about that one God. In Hinduism, the name of that God is Brahman. Now, it's not, don't confuse it with Brahmin. There's only one letter difference. It's an I and then A. Okay, so Brahmin is a caste, is the priestly caste. Brahman is the name of the absolute God in Hinduism. Now, this Brahman in Hinduism is an impersonal being. So, they won't call this God he or she, they would say it, because it has no qualities. Okay. In Vedas, it clearly says it has no qualities. That's how it actually says. The exact statement in Vedas is it has no qualities. Okay. It's impersonal. Why is that? Now, think about this. This is an important point, and this is a good point for you to dialogue with Muslims also. Not only Muslims, anyone who believes in absolute Unitarianism or absolute monotheism, there's an issue with that. Some people don't like using that absolute monotheism, but actually Cordovan uses that word, absolute monotheism, or absolute unity, whatever you want to call it, or mathematical singularity. Okay, those are the real terms that people use, or different terms that people use. So if you have this idea, like the idea of Muslims have about God is absolute mathematical singularity, right? Trinitarian, we believe, as Christians, we believe there is Trinity in Trinitarianism. We have unity and diversity in God. It actually again boils down to philosophy. We talk about monism in Greek philosophy, right? If absolute reality is that absolute one, right, that's monism, right? Now, how do we accommodate the diversity and unity that we see in the universe? That's why we need something like Trinitarianism, and that's why that belief is so beautiful. So, when I talk about this impersonal problem, you will realize why Trinitarianism is actually more logical. Sometimes we think of Trinitarianism as illogical or against logic. It's actually more logical than anything, because the Hindu philosophers, they thought if God is absolute one, just like the Muslims believe, okay, or the Jehovah's Witnesses believe, they don't actually believe that, but that's what they want us to believe. But any other Unitarian church, even Judaism, right? If this absolute God is one person, how can that one person have any qualities? Do you get the point? Okay, if not, let me do this like a Hindu sage, okay? I am on the Himalayas. I am on the Himalayas. I am alone. Who do I love?
Nobody.
There's nobody to love.
Nobody loves.
Who can love me? Nobody is there, right? Who do I talk to?
Nobody.
Who do I show love to? Who do I communicate with? So they realized this problem, right? And they said this absolute being has to be without any qualities. Now, this is a big point. Actually, Augustine, Saint Augustine, Catholic of course, but great thinker, we Christians, Protestant Christians love him too. He actually pointed this out. C.S. Lewis later on did, and they showed, they used this as a powerful argument against Unitarianism, and argued, a Muslim belief is actually not logical, because you have an absolute unity which cannot have any qualities, right? God has to be God with his qualities irrespective of the creation. So if God is love, which like the Bible says God is love, if God has to be love, which is absolute quality, right, he has to have some kind of diversity within Godhead. That's why Trinitarianism becomes more beautiful, because in Trinity you have this possibility of God eternally being love, being holy in the relationship with one another. Holiness is not sinning, right? Holiness is right relationship, right? So in Trinitarianism we have right relationship, and they can communicate between them, and there is this eternal relationship, eternal love. God can be all those with qualities in Trinitarian belief system, but not in this belief system. And this is also true of, you should actually take the Hindu teaching to show the Muslim that he is wrong, because the Hindus discovered if God is absolute unity, he has to be without qualities.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure,
about that?
yeah.
So is there a difference between saying, is saying that God has no qualities more like saying, like an like the atheist might say, well, you know, material reality, you know, abject subjectivity has no, you know, qualia. It has no hot or cold. It's just blind matter. And so the atheist would say there's maybe in that way of thinking no qualities to materialism.
It could have physical qualities,
Yeah.
but no personal related or qualia type.
Yeah, no definable qualities in the sense that it's just dumb substance that you doesn't have any feel because there's nobody to feel it. Is it more like that, or is it more like saying that God is undefinable? Like he has so many qualities that it's like he has none, because you can't say one particular thing about him because there's, you know, as soon as you try to box him in with one statement, that you're already you know, abjecting, you're
If
missing
all is
out.
God, it's hard to narrow him down.
Right,
Sort of thing.
Well,
yeah, exactly. Like,
it's both. But when we say all is God, again, all comes only after creation, right? We are talking about that one, in the absolute one there, right? So
are you talking about? So we're talking about Brahman.
Brahman, yeah, we are talking about Brahman. So so it's both. So two problems. The Hindus found out that you cannot tell actually anything about God, just like you said,
Yeah, right,
by defining. For example, if you say God has two hands, right, you are limiting.
Right.
He has only two hands. He has two eyes. Okay, God has only two eyes, right? You are limiting in that sense, so you cannot say anything about it. So it's not just the one statement that God is impersonal. They have a reason for that. They give actual reason for that.
Yeah.
So you cannot tell anything about God, or you cannot put anything like that. Second one is the personal qualities. To have personal qualities, you need to have multiple persons. See, otherwise, like I said, you cannot have love, right? Love is a quality, and you can have it only if there are more than one beings, right? If there is only one being, you cannot have it. It's a being. A being will be loving itself, right? So there's no feeling kind of thing. So you cannot attribute any personal qualities or feelings like mercy, compassion, and things that to God. That's why it's impersonal. You know, no personal qualities.
This Brahman is eternally existent? Do they believe the universe was created though, or do they think the universe
No,
has
this
to be
Brahman,
eternal?
this Brahman is eternal.
The Brahman is eternal.
Yeah, the
right.
creation is out of. So out of this Brahman, then comes these three gods I told you about earlier. You know, three main gods. So those gods have personal qualities.
Right.
Okay, so you need to balance, right? So you see qualities in this world. So you will always have a question. Okay, where did these qualities came from then, right? So the answer is, okay, this God, out of this God, again, he doesn't create, because creation will be a personal, qualitative thing to do, right? So out of him comes out these three gods who have personal qualities, and then one of them does the creation.
It's very similar, you know, to I think to thinking about materialism and the idea on materialism that like consciousness is an arisen property, and therefore subjective states and qualities would be arisen properties.
Emergent properties.
Emergent
whatever,
properties, yeah.
So yeah, a Christian argument about that would be, how can qualities come out of non-quality, right? Is quality better or non-quality better, right? So how can something better come out of something that's not or lower quality? So we already talked about the literature. So there's no idol worship. Again, that's something, again, when you talk about philosophical Hinduism, they don't talk about idols and many gods and all, okay? And no nature worship and festivals and things like that. So in fact, there are philosophical Hindu groups who actually teach not to worship idols, okay? Okay, yes, please.
Is it that they don't believe that those beings exist, or that they believe they exist but they choose not to worship them?
They, like I said, they actually teach not to worship idols because they are not real. According to that philosophical Hinduism, actually there's only one God, the real
Do they
God.
believe that out of that one God came the three different gods? Like, do they believe at that level?
So
or do they
that's where, see, the philosophical Hinduism will jump down to popular Hinduism. So as soon as you talk about the different gods and things like that, you are slowly going down to the.
So the moment you move away from that.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, where do you draw the line is very difficult. That's why I said the Hindus can always make that leap both ways. Okay. Yes.
No, I,
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're fine. Okay. So we already talked about monism in India. This monism was made popular only in again 8th century AD, but that doesn't mean it started in 8th century AD, because he made it popular from Vedas. So this was already in Vedas. So he took this idea of monism and taught this and made it popular. Now if you take many of the Hindu gurus in the West, those who have come to the West to convert people here, like with different missions, Hindu missions and all. If you look up, there are so many. Okay, Divine Light mission, these yoga gurus and all those transcendental meditation, they all actually belong to this first school, and they all believe in monism or pantheism. Okay, and he made this school famous. There was a problem when Buddhism spread in India and beyond. Right, Buddhism almost took over and became the major religion in India, and the Hindus wanted to stop the growth of Buddhism somehow, and they couldn't, because the problem, if you look at Buddhism, the whole Buddhism is based on one answer to a worldview issue: why there is pain and what's the solution, right? Why there is suffering, the fourfold truth of Buddhism is all about suffering, right? Why there is suffering, how can we find a solution, right? So when the Hindu, this person called Shankara, Acharya means guru, so Shankara, he saw this, he thought, I had to defend my, most people want to defend their religion, right? So he wanted to defend Hinduism. So he came up with this teaching and said, well, the question the Buddhist ask is about suffering. And he said, nothing is real. If nothing is real, why are you asking about suffering? So he said, everything, reality is one. There's only God. There's only Brahman. You are God. You are Brahman. In Sanskrit, there's a statement called Tattvam Asi, which means in English, it's translated exactly like this: thou art that, which means you are the one that you are seeking. Get the point? The God that you are seeking, you are that. Once you're not finding peace because you are looking at the wrong place. You are not looking within. So that's why the yogas and meditation, and finally it's all about meditating on yourself, because God is within you, because you are Brahman, you are God. So you have to realize that all is God, God is all, and you are part of that God. That is salvation for you. Okay. And it's like the serpent's gospel. If you eat this fruit, you will know that you will be like God, right? So that's what Hinduism actually teaches. You are gods. Yes, please.
This might be where you're going with this, but I mean, if you are God, but God has no qualities and is nothing, doesn't that make you nothing?
Now, if you are looking for contradictions in Hinduism, you will find it everywhere. Okay, so yeah. So here is something, so this is again, they used to have actually literal dialogues or debates with Buddhist scholars in those days, right? So they used to actually have public dialogues, and he would argue like this, and so one of the questions that they would ask was, so you are saying you are not real. What is real is Brahman. And he said, yeah. He said, I am not. That's actually a statement. I am not. Brahman is. Right? So the question is, when you say I am not, who are you saying you are not? Right? Is Brahman saying I am not? Yeah. Is Brahman saying I am not? If Brahman is saying I am not, that means Brahman doesn't exist. Right? Now if Shankara is saying I am not, then who is speaking? Right? Yeah. So, contradiction right there. So Hinduism is all about contradictions. Okay, that's what happens when you again reject the divine revelation and trust only in human minds. Even it's not just Hinduism. Think about monism. The Greek philosophy. We say we are all beings, therefore we are all one. We are all real, right? But he would argue against someone who disagrees with him.
Yeah.
There is duality. So you will actually see contradiction even in great Greek philosophers. So yeah, don't think it's just in Hinduism, but you are right, you got it. Yeah. So as a result of that, this Buddhist dialogue, again, historically speaking, this guy was actually able to stop the growth of Buddhism in India. That's why you see actually Buddhism spread beyond India into Sri Lanka, Taiwan, China, Vietnam, Korea, Japan. Didn't grow in India. Hinduism became again the predominant religion. Yes.
Yeah, I just I think it's important to point out, for those of us who may not know, Buddhism came out of really what was proto-Hinduism.
Yeah.
Most people forget that Gautama, Siddhartha. You meet a lot of Indian people named Siddhartha,
Oh, yeah.
especially if you work in tech, That's because Buddha was an Indian. He is from India, and in fact, the tree that is ostensibly where he obtained enlightenment is inside India.
Yeah.
There's some really cool books about biographies of Buddha, but yeah, I think it's his movement is really almost like a kind of a spiritual. I compare it to Jesus and how he kind of rejected the hard religiosity.
He saw
of the
issues
chief
with like the
priests.
caste system.
Exactly, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so you can think of that as the Reformation in Hinduism,
Yeah,
like the
exactly,
Reformation
yeah.
in Christianity.
Yes,
So,
that's
for
right.
example, he actually stopped the priestly system.
Yeah.
Like no more priests, but then they have monks now, of
Right.
course. But it's not based on caste. So any Buddhist
There's
can
no
be a monk.
gods,
Yeah,
there's no
and
gods.
yeah, and sacrifices and all those gone, right? So. Good point. So, anyways, because of this dialogue with Buddhists who were asking about questions about reality and things like that, someone came up a few centuries later in the 13th century to 14th century called Madhava, and he said we have to agree that there is duality. Otherwise we will not be able to even have a dialogue. Why are you dialoguing with Buddhists? Right? Even that simple question, right? If the soul is one, why are you even having a dialogue, right? Who are you teaching? Are you teaching Brahman? Right? So, when these people who actually believe, like I told you, most of the gurus, they are in this first group. When they come and tell, if nothing worse, I tell them, I am Brahman, will you listen to me? Because that's what they believe, right?
Yeah.
So, I ask them, I am Brahman, why are you arguing with me? Why don't you just listen to
They
me?
can't really come back at that.
So, okay, so the second guy came and said, well, we have to agree that God is something different, we are something different. See, what happens is in the first one, they are different. They are basically removing the distinction between the creator and creation, right? When you say all is God, God is all, you are taking out that difference. So the second one came and said, okay, we are real. God is real, we are real. The creation is real. So that's another philosophy. And then there is third one called qualified monism. You might wonder what that is, right? So qualified monism, this is I don't know if there's a good example other than this one written here. Just like a body has not body, we have a body and soul. So according to that theory, God has something, like what we see in this world, that's like one pole of God, but the other side of pole, he's like this oneness and everything is one, but there's kind of a multiplicity. So it's like a two-pole thing. God is a two-pole thing. On one side you see diversity, on one side you see unity. So what he tries to do there is, kind of accommodate the unity and diversity, which is a problem actually in philosophy too, because we actually see a lot of unity, right? In spite of being different, we actually see a lot of unity between us. There are a lot of things that are in common between us, right? So he's trying to accommodate that two aspects, somewhere in between those two. Okay, the 12th, 10th, 11th century there, all right. So when it comes to truth, again, surprisingly, truth is relative to them. Now, why is that? In spite of believing in this one God, like I told you, that one God has no qualities, right? So everything that is, when it comes to the real operation of this world, they believe about those three gods. I told you, one creates, one sustains, one puts to death, right? So when you have three gods, how do you define what is true? Because one God might say this is right, another God might say that is wrong, right? So for example, one of the incarnations of there's a main God called Krishna who is the sustainer. Okay. Now another thing about Hinduism is a utilitarian religion. It means a God is good if that God is useful. Okay. If the God is not useful, what's the good then, right? So I'll tell you one example. I told you there are three main gods, tritheism. One is of creation, is called Brahma. Okay, the spellings are different, so don't get confused. Brahma. Second one is Vishnu. Vishnu is the one who sustains. and Shiva, who is the destroyer, okay, who kills. Now, Brahma, the one who created, actually there's hardly any temple for that God. Now, in Christianity, we call God creator, that's our primary definition of God, right? The creator of everything. For them, he's done with his job. Why do we need him? Right?
Okay, interesting.
You don't need him. He's done. So you need the one who sustains. He's the one who sustains. You have to give offering and please him, right? There's no use pleasing the creator. He's done with his job, right? So the sustainer is the one. So he's the one who has these 10 incarnations. And then, of course, the one who destroys, you have to keep him happy too, otherwise he might come early to take you, right? So, and again, so one of these gods, incarnations, his name is Krishna. So in popular Hinduism, a very popular god, Krishna. Now, Krishna has, according to the story that Hindus have, like 10,000 wives. Right, nothing compared to Solomon, right? So now the question is, what is right, polygamy or monogamy, right? So this is the problem when you believe in many gods, because what is good for one god may not be good for another god. What is true for one god may not be true for another god, right? So that's why they cannot have a basis for an absolute view of truth. Because in order to have an absolute view of truth, you need to have an absolute basis, foundation, which they don't have. So they believe truth is relative. It's a matter of perspective. One God might have one statement as true, another God might say, that's not right. Okay. So truth is relative according to Hindu philosophy. So very close to actually postmodernism. Okay. Truth is a matter of perspective. So I tell actually postmodern philosophers, read Vedas. You are not postmodern. This is ancient theory. Actually, it's pre-modern. Okay, so absolute truth is unknowable. This is another thing. Again, if you want to look for contradiction there, you can find contradiction in that statement. It's a self-contradictory statement. Absolute truth is unknowable. That's a knowledge, right? So that's a knowledge, right? So contradictions, and again, that's not necessarily Hindu philosophy. That's agnosticism, right? That's agnosticism. So there is contradictions everywhere in philosophy also. We already talked about that. Some of you might have heard about the story of elephant. This is a famous story that most Hindu teachers will use, gurus will use to argue that truth is actually a matter of perspective or is relative. The story goes like this: 7 blind men, or depending on the story, it will be 5 sometimes. Okay, went to see an elephant. Okay, blind men going to see elephant. So one touches the belly of the elephant, and he comes back and he argues that elephant is like a wall. Okay. Now one touches the tail of the elephant, and he says, he comes back and argues strongly that the elephant is like a broom. Okay. Another touches the ear of the elephant and says the elephant is like a fan. Okay. Another touches the tusk of the elephant and says it's like a spear, and things like that, right? So then they say this is how religious extremism is. You have a narrow view of truth and you think your view is true. In fact, reality is much larger than that, much different than that. You are so narrow-minded. Okay? That's how you put the story. They put the story and try to convince you about truth being relative. Now the problem is, who knows what the elephant is like, right? Is there something called elephant, right? Is it all 5 those, or are all those 5 statements true because they are just different perspective and experience? No, we know that there is actually something called elephant, and the storyteller is able to tell the story because we know what an elephant is like. It's not like a broom or not like a wall, and we understand that all because there is something called elephant that is true. Right? But you use the same story to confuse people. This is how these gurus confuse people. Okay, and they use, you will actually see the story in many of the Hindu books where they argue for truth being relative. So again, we talked about contradictions. This is about Hindu logic. For Hindu logic, in the West mostly we follow the logic called either or, right? Either this is true or that is true, right? In Hinduism, it's both and logic. One God is true, many God, that also is true. Is God one? Yes. Are gods many? Yes. Okay. Is both and. Now, how do you balance that? Well, this one God appears as many. That's how they will present. Okay, so they believe in both and logics. So it's very difficult to dialogue with them too, because they will keep jumping between these without any problems, where you, as you find contradictions, they may not be realizing that. We already talked about the spread of Hinduism, and so we'll skip those things. We already talked about that. Maya, well, here was a question asked to Shankara, the one who made monism famous in India. You know, the Buddhists actually used to ask him, so why do you think, or why do we see this reality? Why do we see like this world is real? If everything is one, if everything is God, right? Why there is this table? Why why do we see these things? So he said, it's all because of an illusion. It's not reality. And he used the story of a rope. He said, you walk, in those days there were no electricity, no lights, right? So when it's kind of getting slowly dark, the sun is going down, you walking on this road, there are snakes in India everywhere. So you see a rope lying on the street, and you misunderstand it for a snake and get scared, right? It's in reality it's a rope. It's not a snake. So what you see is like that. It's an illusion. It's not reality. That was his argument. So he had disciples. Like I told you, all these Hindu gurus, they all teach the same doctrine even today, right? So once they were going through a jungle, the story has two versions. When they were going through a jungle, an elephant chased them in one story. In another story, it's a tiger. We don't know which one is real, but this really happened. So someone saw the tiger or the elephant, and they start running, and there are elephants and tigers in India, so either one could be true. So they start running, they all run. So all the disciples are running, this Guru Shankara is running, and everybody is running, and they finally got into a house, and they closed the door, and they were sitting, and they're panting and taking deep breath and tired, and finally when they were able to speak, one of the disciples spoke up and asked, Guru, you said none of these things are real, then why did you run? Right? This really happened, okay? What was his answer? So adamant. This is where you know the truth, but you are not willing to admit the truth. He said, the tiger or the elephant. The tiger or the elephant, that was not real. You seeing it was not real. Our running was not real. Nothing is real. Now, again, see, don't think that this is just, don't think this is happening only in Hinduism. I told about Parmenides and Zeno in Greek philosophy. So in what they did, some of your teachers and all here, what the Greek philosophers did was, they actually, one of them actually took his disciples to the top of a mountain and dropped a stone, from the top of the mountain, and asked his disciples to count the time it took for the stone to reach the ground, right? They could, so they were counting. And then he started asking the question, how much time it would take for the stone to travel half of that? And he would repeat that question forever. And you get the point? Half of that, half of that, half of that. What do you have? An infinite indivisibility, right? So then the other example they did was, you draw a line on a paper or a board, right? Now that line is, mathematically, it's unlimited, right? It's infinite points. I mean, even a shorter line, this line is infinite points, right? So you divide it. How many points in half of that? How many points in half of that? Half of that, half of that, half of that. So the Greek philosophers used those two examples to argue that what we see is not real. Nothing is real. So it's not just the Hindu philosophers who are using the reason to come up with foolish arguments, okay? Greek philosophers did that too, and they became popular for that. So you can see those kind of things everywhere. It's not just in Hinduism. So his argument was then, the illusion is caused by ignorance, because you are ignorant. Remember I told you, why are you seeking God outside? Because you are ignorant. You don't know that you are God. So when you come out of this ignorance and realize that you are God, so this is the greatest point of yoga. In Hinduism, there are three ways of salvation. One is karma. You said about every religion, like Buddhism. Every religion that sprang up from India, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, they all have this idea of karma. Okay, that's something they inherited from Hinduism, right? So karma marga, and the second way of salvation is Actually, the first way is jnana marga. Okay, that's the supreme jnana, way of knowledge, and then karma marga, way of work, and bhakti marga, which is actually later development called way of devotion. Actually, they copied from Christianity. Okay, the idea of devotion. So the knowledge you have to get is that you are God. So you don't know that. So when you get that knowledge, that is the way of knowledge. That's the way of salvation. That becomes salvation for you. Just let me finish and then we'll come to that. So again, contradiction in whom is the ignorance. If there's only Brahman, right? So if you're looking for contradiction, like I said, you will find it everywhere, but they have no problem with that. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
I was just going to say, when you finally do realize that and know that you are God, how do you know that that's not yet a deeper illusion? That how do you know that that's
Exactly.
I think it
Exactly.
is, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
why can't that be
especially if there
illusion
can.
and this be reality?
Exactly, especially if there can be illusion in Brahman, right? If we are all Brahman, if there is illusion in us, ignorance in us, yeah, the whole thing can be an illusion too, right?
I think it's similar to the problem in Christianity of how do you escape your own sinfulness, in the sense that there's nothing that you can do to escape your own
Get
sinfulness.
rid of your sin nature.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so there is no idea of sin in Hinduism, okay? Actually, there was a famous Hindu philosopher and teacher who actually spoke at the Chicago Religious Conference. He said, anyone who calls a man a sinner is a sinner.
That's the only sin. Another contradiction.
Yeah, because you are Brahman, right? How can you sin? You are Brahman.
Yeah.
So who is human beings then, right? Human beings are gods. I am God, okay? I am not really real. What is real is Brahman, okay? That's the view of God, anthropology, okay? Who is man? What is absolute reality? Metaphysics, it is impersonal. Absolute reality is impersonal. There are no personal qualities whatsoever, okay? And we told the problem, it's all because of illusion and ignorance, and the duality that we see is because of ignorance. We told the story of tiger already. And what do they believe by salvation? Okay. Now, this is a big one. Now, I am thinking of writing actually something on this topic of salvation alone, because you have heard about inclusivism and pluralism, right? In inclusivism, within Christianity, there's a movement called inclusivism where they teach that all people will be saved through Christ. Now, that's inclusivism, which means you include everyone in Christ. Okay, it doesn't matter what you believe, you will be saved through Christ. The other view is called pluralism. That's what you see actually very popular in universities and all. Like every religion is right. Every religion has their own way of salvation. Every religion leads to God. It's actually a foolish statement when you really understand, because you are even making that statement from a Christian perspective. Because salvation for every religion is different. So when you say, every religion leads to salvation, what do you mean? Because for Christians, salvation is eternal life. For Hindus and Muslims, salvation is actually end of life. Because they believe in karma and recycles and rebirth, right? So when you have sin or bad karma, you come back to this life. So your salvation is actually not coming back to this life. End of that birth cycle. You are no longer coming back. Is the end of it. That is what salvation is for Hindu and Buddhist. So when you say all people are going to go to salvation, through Christ or through any religion, the question, what do you mean by salvation? Right? So that's a big one. So the word they use, moksha, which is very similar to actually escape. That's the meaning of moksha, escape. But it's an escape from not from sin or hell or death. It's an escape from life.
Wow. It's kind of they had a depressing view of life, huh?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
if you're-
They don't have a good view of life. Life is bad. Life is bad in Hinduism. The first point of Buddhism, the four, that famous laws. Suffering. Life is suffering.
Oh, yes, sir.
Life is bad. Life is bad. It's suffering. There is nothing good. How can I end it? That's the goal of Buddhism. Is all about ending that life, that karma cycle, and Hinduism too.
Kind of sounds
Same with
satanic. doesn't it,
same
when you
same
think
thing
of
with
it?
Jainism. Yeah, that's actually So maybe by the time I come back next time, I'll have a book written on this topic. So that's something in my mind I have been thinking about. So rebirth is pain. It's not, we think about, rebirth. Oh, okay, we have another chance. No, it's actually doom. You are coming back to the suffering world. Rebirth is bad actually. Okay. So they are escaping from the rebirth, that cycle of rebirth. That's salvation for a Hindu and Muslim. So how do you understand worldviews? Yes, please. Yeah.
So, but if they believe that everybody's God, then so when you obtain enlightenment, and then aren't you just merging back into God, and you're going to incarnate all over again? So it's the infinite process.
No, so in Buddhism and Hinduism,
Yeah.
when you attain that, so in Buddhism it's the same thing, the nirvana, right? When you realize that you are basically Buddha, right?
Right, yeah.
You escape, you don't come back.
Yeah, but your God, who is eternal,
No thought.
There's no God in
But
Buddhism.
it's not a personal God.
So
Right.
yeah, so that's Buddhism. Now in Hinduism,
right, okay, yeah,
so in Hinduism, here the example they use is a drop of water and sea.
yeah, right.
So when a drop of water is up there, is real, right? It has its own existence. So there's a duality. There's water down there in the sea, and this drop is real too. But when the drop of water falls into the sea, it loses its duality. Independent existence becomes just it merges with the rest of the water, right? So they say that's what happens when you end. So you realize that you are part of that water, Brahman, you merge with it, become one with it. There's no more duality.
But you were
No more
already,
personality.
Yeah.
you were already part of it to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And
You're not part of it. You are that. Thou art that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you.
So my point is that if you're already that,
Didn't know it.
then there is no merging,
Didn't know it.
and so you're just part of the infinite
Yeah.
Brahma who incarnates.
You are feeling all this because you are ignorant.
But you've lost consciousness
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, that's
So-
what I'd be kind of interested in. My intuition is that there's probably multiple schools about this, like where maybe it is kind of your you lose your consciousness and you never come back, or is it like that?
Both hands. Yeah, you're probably right. There's probably multiple schools.
I'm sure there's multiple
Yeah.
schools, right? I'm sure some people are like, well, you merge with God, so you have, like, I attended a meditation seminar once where the first part of it was totally, just simple meditation, but then it got into like, well, you'll remember your past memories, and you'll remember, all of the lives you've lived before. So I'm wondering if maybe there are some schools where that's what merging with God is like, where you become one with the Godhead, so you have all these memories and knowledge.
Sounds like they don't want to come back though. That's their goal for a lot of them anyway.
Yeah, they don't want to come back because this life is bad. It's suffering and pain and all.
that's-
So
Yeah,
Life is suffering.
that is kind of sad.
This is very enlightening.
yeah.
Very, very well
It is
done.
So,
kinda sad.
Yeah, I think we talked about almost everything. I just want to finish with this one slide because we kind of talked about everything else that I have. So how do you see Hinduism in this age? I mean, here in the West, right? They don't come with the title Hinduism or with all those gods. I mean, of course, you have those temples, and I mean, in Frisco alone, probably you have 20 temples now. Okay, so all those gods and statue in Houston, the famous big statue that's becoming popular, all those things, of course, coming for Hindus. But when they come to you, they are not going to bring them, right? Yeah, they're not going to bring this god and tell you to worship that god initially, at least. Okay, how do they come? They come with the New Age movement, yoga. It's good for you. Well, why don't you just call it exercise, right? Why do you have to call it yoga? And why do you have to start chanting eventually, mantras and things like that? Transcendental meditation, it's within you. You thou art that, look within you, those kind of movements. The world of gurus, there are so many gurus, this guru, that guru, and basically, if you actually dig down, they will all believe in what we actually told monism, that you are God, you are part of God.
They don't actually believe in
They believe that.
He's saying they're all monists.
Yeah,
Oh,
they
okay,
are
yeah.
all
All
monists.
these
They all believe that you are
ones
God. All is God. God is all. That's what they believe. So there's actually a book called "When the New Age Gets Old," because this is in the 20th century. They called the New Age movement, right? So the New Age, this title, the book called "When the New Age Gets Old." In this book, he actually surveys the gurus that came to the West mainly, and their teachings and practices, and exposes their shallow, hollow philosophy and things like that. Okay. Well, I think it's already over time, so we'll stop it there. But good, lively discussion. Thanks for that. Yes.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Really good.
Thank you.
The reincarnation issue, what kind of rebirth are they talking about? I mean, do you get to come back as another human being or another creature, or how does that
So rebirth and reincarnation are different. Rebirth is you coming back, into next life or something else. It could be anything, including plants and animals. Depending on if you were rude to trees or animals, you might come back as one of them.
They
Okay.
don't want to kill the cows because
Yeah,
that's their
depending
ancestors.
depending on their karma, right? Depending on your karma, you'll come back as anything. Now reincarnation is different. Reincarnation is actually God, God's incarnations. Of course, Buddhists have some idea of reincarnation too. Buddha coming as reincarnate, but that's not real Buddhism. That's more like popular Hinduism. That's like popular Buddhism. In real Buddhism, Buddha is gone. He has escaped. He is no more in touch. In Nirvana, in real Buddhism, Nirvana, once you are Nirvana, you are out of touch with this world. Yeah, you are not worried about it. You are not involved with it.
So in Buddhism, there's bodhisattvas, which are
Gods in making, Buddhas in making.
yeah.
Yeah, but again, those are all later developments.
And it's my understanding that in bodhisattvas are it's a Buddha who, instead of choosing to merge back into nirvana, is the end goal in both Hinduism and in Buddhism. Instead, they remain in the world to try to guide more souls towards nirvana.
Yeah, that's why I said they are gods in the making, Buddhas in making. They are on the way there, but now they are involved in helping, because the real Buddha cannot. The real Buddha cannot involve in the world. So there are these medium Buddhas who can be involved and help you. So yes, please.
So for someone who relies on logical statements only being true or false, and they want to, try to point out a contradiction in Hinduism or something, and the Hindu just says, he talks about that logic, something can be both and true and false at the same time. With their set of logic that they have, are they technically you can't say that they're wrong?
They will usually use it's usually stories or some examples, like the elephants example. Another one would be 6. They would write, some of them do this. They would write a 6 on a paper, and then ask you what that is. So you are standing opposite to me, you will read it as 9. See, for you it's 9, for me it's 6. We both are right. It's a perspective.
Yeah.
So they will use these kind of stories and examples.
But if I say it's
Well, what is it actually? Well, what did you write? Right? The author actually decides what it is.
tricky.
This is actually in literature too. It's happening in literature. There is something called postmodern reading. In postmodern reading, you read, you give meaning to it. Postmodernism, basically, you decide what is the meaning, right? So you read that, you decide it is 9 or 6. No, but in a real sense, the author has the meaning. The author decides what it is.
Right. I'm just trying to think if they just say reality is beyond conception. I mean, it's very it's kind of silly, but that's kind of, you can't really say anything in response. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's why I said some skepticism is good, some agnosticism is actually good. It's when it becomes hard skepticism, hard agnosticism, they are bad. Not some agnosticism, not some skepticism. In reality, even Christians, we believe that God is unknowable. Why is God knowable now? Because God has revealed himself. If God did not reveal himself in the nature through special revelation in Christ and scripture, we would not have known, we would have thought the same thing like the Hindus thought. God is unknowable, no qualities whatsoever. We cannot tell anything about God because he is beyond our knowledge. But he is beyond our knowledge, The good thing is he's a self-revealing God. He has revealed himself. That's why we know him.
And I wonder if, you know, my take on it, I think there's a lot of common ground here. You know, as you just said, even in Christianity, there's a lot, we don't know everything about God or God's purpose, or, you know, we know what's revealed through Christ and what we can think we apprehend, but, you know, I think there's, you know, as you were going through your presentation, you know, I was dealing with the feeling of like, there's a lot in this that I believe, right? You know, I mean, we don't know everything about reality, but we know some things,
Yeah.
right? And so there's
But
something else. I was
we
gonna-
don't believe in these contradictions.
No, you can always say, you know,
believe in-
those are
there's a
called,
lot of
you know,
differences
we
too,
call
but-
them common grounds
Right.
or bridges that we can build on.
Right.
You know, for example, in Hinduism there are stories of incarnations,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
So we have a story of incarnation.
You know,
And-
it was actually studying Hinduism and reading Hinduism, learning about Hinduism and Buddhism, which is how I began to understand how to make sense of the Trinity in Christianity. When I was a skeptic, I thought that's just the God, the
Seemed
Father, the
contradictory.
Son. He's the same person, but he's different, and he sacrifices himself to himself. To somebody who doesn't want to see how that comes together, that appears like a contradiction, right? Father is the Son is the same person, right? But you know, as I kind of strive to apprehend Hinduism and how the non-dual thinking worked, I slowly put together, okay, so that's how it works in Christianity, or it's similar. It's maybe not the same way of putting a theological system together, but it's similar. You know, I tend to think of it like Christians would think of the body of Christ as non-dual, and maybe the people who are outside the body of Christ as what's separate. You know, once you're in Christ, your God is all in all, right? Isn't that true? Isn't that a Christian belief? God is all in all in the body of Christ. I don't claim to be an
I'm
expert
not
on
sure what
any.
you mean by
Well,
that
so
exactly.
here's the thing, you know, if you actually take the metaphysics, you know, we are talking about reality being one or many.
Yeah.
Anytime you take actually an extreme view on either side,
Exactly.
you are wrong.
Yes.
Okay, so when we talk about Christ has two natures,
Yeah.
divine and human. If you ask which was more, you got it wrong. That's why we say Christ was 100% human, he was 100% divine, right? So that's how where unity and diversity comes together. So same thing is true about Trinity,
Yes.
right? When you ask about Trinity, which is basic, you know, the metaphysics question,
Yeah.
is the reality being one basic or reality being many basic? Fundamental, what is fundamental, right?
One
Yeah,
nature,
okay,
three
thank
persons.
Yes.
You see,
can't
unity is fundamental. You have a
Right.
problem. You become a Unitarian.
Yeah.
You become multiplicity is fundamental. You become a
Thank you so much
tritheist.
for saying this is
Yeah.
actually something that actually just in the past year I really kind of honed in on. I was talking with a Christian. I think he was a Christian. Again, I don't claim to be an expert on what is Christian belief, you know, but I was talking with a guy who was basically saying to me, and this is something I'd kind of come to believe on my own, but I hadn't really put words to it. And he was basically, cause I had kind of come to understand that Christian thinking, Christian philosophy is more like the opposite of monism, right? It's like,
Yeah, that's what it is opposite of monism
definitely
and
is
pluralism
monism,
too, right?
Is it
And
opposite?
polytheism.
my
That-
apprehension
so-
was that I've come to believe that at least my Christian belief, or that a Christian belief, is not kind of, as I think you were saying, going to an extreme on either, right? There is unity, but there is also multiplicity, and so it's trying to.
That's what I'm telling you. So when you think about metaphysics, this argument, great argument about
Yeah.
God being one or many, or reality being one or many, you know, we have this beautiful Trinitarianism where you have, you know, where you have both unity and diversity. And then when you ask this question, you know, like a metaphysics question will be, if unity is one or many, right? Or let's say if it's one, the question will be, okay, If it is one, why do we see multiplicity?
Yeah, exactly.
So if you see multiplicity, then which is more fundamental, unity or multiplicity, right?
Yeah.
So that's where in Trinitarianism we have both, and we cannot ask which is more fundamental.
So
both are
neither is-
fundamental.
Right, okay.
So and we have the same example in Christ, which is fundamental. He's 100% humanity or 100% divine. No, both are same, both are equal.
Okay, so
Right?
that's
One is not over the other.
belief
So
that both
yeah.
are
So
equal.
when it comes to
God is
Trinitarianism,
fully
Okay.
man and
Yeah.
fully human.
Right, no,
So-
but I'm talking specifically about the ontology, like.
yeah. So that's what. So when we talk about the
pluralism or-
ontology of Trinity, we cannot say unity is more fundamental. We cannot say multiplicity is more fundamental.
Yeah.
Both are fundamental.
Yeah, I actually came to, I didn't realize that that was like a Christian
Yeah.
belief
Yeah.
until actually this summer I was talking to a guy and he was basically told me that.
Yeah.
And, but I had actually started to think that on my own,
Yeah.
although I hadn't
good.
really
Yeah.
put
Yeah.
words
Well.
to it.
All right, well, that was really
Thank you.
good, and we are
Good
out
show.
of time.
Thanks for
so
having me. Appreciate that. Always love being here. So thanks, Alan.
Thank
So,
you, that was great.
Thank you so much.
Sure.